Hey guys, it's Pineapple and I missed you guys last week for chapter 331, so let's quickly discuss chapter 331 and then move into talking about chapter 332 because one chapter perfectly leads into the next. Last chapter we saw Star get blown back by Shigaraki's transformation, which really just amounted to his hair getting longer. I really don't have a clue why his hair is getting longer and what that signifies, and usually I try to kind of apply meaning to this stuff since I don't think that Horikoshi wastes any panels, but here I just actually don't know. So like Star, I'm puzzled, and it comes across as a cool kind of Dragon Ball style mid-fight power-up. Suddenly, Shigaraki starts thinking very analytically. He starts to break down Star's Quirk New Order based on the information that he had before arriving at the battlefield in the sky, and based on what he's observed during their fight. He deduces that she has a limit on how much power she can call on, and that she has to be very specific about the rules that she creates. They can't just be worded willy-nilly, or in a way that seems like it can instantly kill someone, or impose a condition on them without her knowing their name and imposing it that way. Now in this chapter, Shigaraki confirms that he's a mix between Shigaraki, All For One, and even Tenko Shimura, meaning those of us still holding on to the thought that Shiggy hasn't let go of his original personality Tenko, who wanted to be a hero and can be calmed down and saved by Nana and Deku potentially, are definitely feeling like this is a big deal, because Hori could have just mentioned Shigaraki and All For One's names like he did in the previous chapters when Shigaraki arrived here, but now we're getting acknowledgement that the Tenko personality is starting to come to the surface as well, which might tie back into those flashbacks that we keep getting from Shigaraki that seem to be happening in a way more spread out fashion, but I believe we're very slowly being led into a big moment for Shigaraki involving the flashback of the day that he killed his parents, because Hori keeps showing us the house again and giving us small moments of monologue regarding it. Now if you know my theory on what happened that day and how it relates to Deku, you know where I'm going, but I'll put that to the side for now and just say, notice how Shigaraki starts to actually lose himself in the irresistible urge to learn about Star's quirk and completely understand it. It's actually the longest explanation for a quirk that I think we've gotten from another character for a long time, with pages and pages of Shigaraki just thinking and going on, which reminds me of Deku quite a bit. But again, I'm gonna leave that there. Now leading into this chapter, we obviously see Star deciding that Shigaraki has to be taken out, and she orders the US to launch supersonic missiles towards the battle, with the hope of taking Shigaraki out with those, as she turns the air around herself into a giant big booba air guardian that takes the lasers from the different jets and uses them to form a kind of Zeus-like spear to smite Shigaraki into the ocean and hold him there until the missiles arrive. Now in My Hero Academia chapter 332, we pick up with a flashback of Star after doing some training of her unit, and she looks a little roughed up with a patch on her face, and I think the context kind of implies that she might have lost a sparring session or something like that because of being unable to manage her strength boost accurately. Star thinks about how her Quirk New Order isn't as invincible as it seems. At first it seemed pretty hopeless and she felt extremely limited by her quirk, but she wondered if it was more than that. Could it have been because she was a girl? Quickly, I think picking up on some of those feelings, her team reminds her that not all obstacles can be overcome by just one person, no matter how hard they try. So despite her quirk's gaps and flaws, she has to remember that they're still there to cover those gaps, and instead of trying to push herself even further down All Might's path, she needs to accept that she's already great enough and make use of the ones that she has around her. Even though they do joke about her being the only one who could maybe get to All Might's heights, I still think the other part is really my takeaway from this section, and it's nice because of course anyone inspired by All Might could go down the route that Deku did when he tried to do everything by himself, or that All Might himself did when of course he did that for his entire career. But here we see someone literally helping Star avoid going down that path. Reasonably, she could have made a rule like I can fly and flown to Japan on her own, but she came with a team, and even though you can still kind of see the clear All Mightness and her deciding to be the only professional hero to go and try to handle it before anyone else can step in to help, I do still appreciate seeing the subtle deviation from All Might's archetype that she took here from bonding with her squad members and ultimately seeing them as friends that she doesn't only have to protect and can bring into battle against the worst of them. And getting that across really matters in this chapter. Like, getting that relationship among all of them, like Hori has been kind of sprinkling in over the last few chapters, is really essential, I think, for the resolution of this chapter. These are all like her brothers, and they never treated her like she was incapable because she was a girl or failed because she was a woman. Anything that she fell short on was just an opportunity for them to rise up and help out a friend. And honestly, let that be an important lesson in life also. As the missiles make their way to the mighty beam of light Star is using to hold Shigaraki down, she thinks fondly of her squad, and they ask her what she plans on doing with the missiles, to which she replies that she'll be grabbing them in a second by undoing her laser rule, so she needs them to concentrate their fire on Shigaraki to keep him down in the split second where she drops the rule. One of the coolest moments in this chapter, in my opinion, is that after last week, after everyone is freaking out that Star was so busted and that her quirk was just insane, Shigaraki just kind of lays there and brushes it off, thinking she must know this isn't doing much to me, which is just so badass! Like he's literally being drilled into the earth by light, held down by a massive 1,000-meter air guardian, and it's just a minor annoyance. It's just kind of a break from battle for him. Some time to think and have some tea maybe, and that aspect of his character that is sort of part of All For One's personality is just totally welcome in my opinion. Just give me all that. He deduces that Star has something up her sleeve that can vaporize him in one go, unlike the lasers holding him down. And from there, the game begins. As Star begins to count down to let her allies know when to start their onslaught of lasers, she begins to catch the Tiamat missiles with her air form. It's interesting to note here that Star does go out of her way to physically touch one of the missiles with her actual body to apply New Order to it, so it doesn't seem like she can apply her rule via the air double, which I know is a little bit of confusion in the last chapter. Maybe she doesn't have to touch the target of her quirk again for every individual rule, meaning that since she used New Order on the lasers previously, she was able to use it again, possibly. Regardless, we see her plan continue to unfold, and she redirects every missile towards the space where Shigaraki is, with us then seeing him dart out and get absolutely mowed down by a pinpoint 7 beam laser attack that continued and held him in place until Star brought down the hammer with her state-of-the-art hypersonic intercontinental cruise punch. Which is just, it's a mouthful, honestly. And it's really hilariously named, but I mean, you know, of course, again, on brand. Star's attack literally splits the sky for miles above the ocean and causes waves to surge, as the blast even sends many of the stealth jets flying backwards. Endeavor, who was previously warned that Shigaraki was heading for Star, finally catches a glimpse of the area that they're fighting in, because really, how could you miss it at this point? And it seems like we can expect him to maybe get there in the next chapter or so, since he really isn't too far out. But what will he be arriving to? Now, before moving forward too far, I just want to comment real quickly on how impressive it is that Star herself completely tanked this blast somehow. Like, yeah, it was her attack, but she pretty much just grabbed 8 intercontinental missiles and smashed them into the ground without really seeming to take any additional damage from it, despite being blown back a bit. Now, in the chaos of that explosion, she sets her eyes on the location where Shigaraki Tomura should be, before the ocean collapses in on itself to fill in the giant hole that she's created on its floor. And looking close, she spots something really troubling. A hole. Bursting out comes Shigaraki, with nearly all of his flesh torn and melted off, with his entire skull exposed and one of his eyes rapidly trying to reform from the damage. He emerges knowing that surely there can be nothing left after all that. And we see that Shigaraki managed to smartly use his decay in order to burrow deep enough into the earth and soil beneath the ocean that he could largely escape the force and destructive power of that giant blast. But the secret component that made all of it possible was the Nomu. It's so perfect that this week I tweeted something like, if I was All For One, I'd have given the Nomu some sort of quirk or something that could be useful in capturing Star, so that while they think it's dead, it could use that to maybe grab her and take her away. But here we see that not only was it the Nomu that took the onslaught of lasers before instead of Shigaraki, but that Nomu, which is now falling in the center of all the stealth jets, is placed perfectly for an ingenious chess play by Shigaraki, or I guess a master hot potato play. But either way, we see every jet trying to get back into formation, and unfortunately for them, Shigaraki uses radio waves to command the flying high end to burst, giving Shigaraki a clear and open path to Star. Now, savagely, Shigaraki tells Star that he makes better use of her resources than she does, as he uses jets to make his way up to her. And that's the key difference here, I think, between the two of them, and what brings us to the conclusion that we got. Shigaraki / All For One sees everything as a resource, as something to use, which is sadly a big departure from Shigaraki from before, who was much more like Star here, who sees each and every one of these guys as a member of her family that she doesn't want to sacrifice despite them being resolved to die previously. In the end, we see Star making a decision. Her pilot is telling her to just crush Shigaraki in the pilot with her air guardian, and surely the damage from the exploding jet will finish Shigaraki off. She goes to slam her hands together and thinks back to the flashback we saw at the beginning of the chapter where her friends had her back and uplifted her, And instead of choosing to take this life in a plan that might not have worked anyway and ultimately taking Shigaraki down, she does the heroic thing and instead doesn't crush her friend and kill him. She doesn't sacrifice someone to get that victory, and because of that, Shigaraki is able to close a distance, and at the end of the chapter, we see his hand firmly on Star's face as she smiles thinking about the friend that she just saved. Now, of this chapter, the finale has brought on a really hot debate, honestly, in whether or not Star and Stripe is actually done. We know that once Shigaraki has his palm on your face, he can initiate the process of stealing your quirk. Some people say that Star can say something like, "My quirk cannot be stolen," and try and keep that from happening, but outside of whether or not that's something that she can truly do, then what? All their cards against Shigaraki have been played, and the only backup that she has to rely on right now is Endeavor, a person who a lesser Shigaraki already defeated without the use of any of his quirks. So is there truly any hope for her, especially considering Shigaraki could just choose to hold her while the real All for One teleports them back to his location? All in all, I think Star and Stripe is done for, and plenty of people have a problem with that just because they think that it means that she was wasted. But the way that I look at this fight in this little mini arc that we're getting with Shigaraki, it seems, is just like the one that we saw with Deku, right? Where he goes around and goes through some interchange and cements his viewpoints for the final arc, while also learning the true depths of his power and mastering his abilities as much as he can through conflict and combat, leading up to his final confrontation with Deku. This is very much Shigaraki's Lady Nagant fight, and I do think it's kind of fair to expect something like this considering the obvious ongoing parallels in the narrative structure that there is between Deku and Shigaraki's characters, so, you know, it's kind of give or take. I do see where people are going because this is kind of different from how Horikoshi often introduces characters and uses them, but again, it just seems like part of how Horikoshi is wrapping the story up. The last thing I want to note is I really think it's cool how we saw early on that the American approach is one of like, hey, if one of us dies, the others have to make sure that their bodies make it home, but we're ready to die for the mission and for the cause if we need to. And Star, who's clearly most influenced by a Japanese hero, who, I mean, interestingly enough, is massively inspired by American media, but that's a whole other thing, chooses to abandon that logic of sacrificing her own for the sake of victory, and she embraces a much more I'd rather die than see all of my allies fall in battle sort of vibe that obviously we've seen from characters like Crust, Night-Eye, and Midnight. So that's what I think about chapter 331 and 332 of My Hero Academia, and those are my impressions. And look out for some more videos this week. I'm working on What If Tenko Part 2, that's nearly complete, and 5 ways All for One could use New Order, which might be something that Horikoshi is going to answer soon. So look out for those soon, and let's get back to it. I'll see you guys again, more videos coming this week. Peace.